At this point in time, it is probably safe to turn the dream into reality so you guys can see what's going on. We're talking about Yuki today, aka Rin 2.0, but AoE, all right? And as you'll see, Yuki's gonna be basically like a character similar to Rin, but she's gonna be very self-sufficient with low-cost cards, ways to draw her cards out of the deck, and she's gonna work around this own unique inspiration mechanic. She's gonna be the first character that really is based around this mechanic. Inspiration is an effect that's going to trigger for a card if it's drawn by another card effect that turn, meaning that a card with inspiration might say it has -1 cost is to be inspiration bonus, so it goes from like a 2 cost to a 1 cost. And the way you trigger that is you have to draw it that turn using the effect of another card. So someone like Nia who can draw with Adagio will affect that card. There's also going to be other things that Yuki has in her kit that allows you to draw her own cards to trigger those inspiration effects. What it doesn't mean though with an inspiration is that you cannot trigger inspiration by just drawing it naturally with like the starting 5 card draw that you get every turn. If you draw an inspiration card that way, it's not going to trigger, and what you want to do is put that card back in the deck somehow and then draw it out with an actual card effect. And also remind yourselves that like even though a lot of the stuff is showcased, it still could change, all right? Don't shoot the messenger. Even on their own video, it says it could change. Our first skill is going to be a normally 2 cost, 180 attack mod to damage all enemies, and the inspiration effect on this is actually going to lower it by 1. So if you draw with inspiration that turn, you're going to have a 1 cost 180 mod that's AoE. The first epiphany that I can see here for it is everything's the same, but the damage goes up to like 270% mod. There's one that keeps the damage 180%, and the inspiration buff goes to making it free for the turn, so it's a free 180 damage AoE. There's an inspiration that allows it to damage once more at 180% damage. There's a 320% damage version with retain that gets 60% damage for every card you've drawn this turn with a cap of 3, so just like a large 2 cost AP AoE nuke. There's one that gives 300 damage to all enemies and then has a higher cost, but every time you cast it, the cost permanently goes down for that encounter. The next one's going to be a 1 cost in the form of Trickery Strike. Trickery Strike is going to have retain. It's going to have 150 damage on it, but activates the inspiration effect of a random card in your hand. So if you drew a bunch of cards for the start, right? 5 cards, they have inspiration on them. They didn't trigger that way because you can't trigger inspiration with natural draws from the start of the turn. Trickery Strike is going to allow you to proc that inspiration for you right there. So it's like a backup effect there. Now, some of the different epiphanies you can get for this is going to give you the retain 180% damage mod, and then you can also just pick, I believe, which inspiration effect out of multiple if you have them in your hand. So if you're running a ton of different inspiration based cards and you want to pick which one you want, that's going to be an epiphany for you there. There's going to be one that gives it retain and retrieval, so you can activate it and then have it again for next turn and activate another one. There's going to be one that gives you activate all of the different inspiration effects in your hand. There's going to be one that is just 150% damage, and then you draw a card out of your deck with inspiration. And then it's just going to be, there's also one that has a larger damage mod, 250%. And then the inspiration, it's going to have an inspiration effect itself that just lowers its cost by 1. So this is a very flexible card. It's going to be something that helps you trigger the inspiration mechanic if you just naturally draw those cards from the start of your turn, which is something that she really needed in her kit. She also has an upgrade card, Freezing Blade, 150% fixed damage, although I think this was lowered down to like 60% at the base version here to all enemies when you use a card that has its inspiration effect activated. So not using a card that has inspiration on it, but using a card where the inspiration effect is active, so you drew it with another card that turn. Just free damage, and it's going to be her baseline upgrade. Some epiphanies for this one include changing it to like fixed damage to a 220% multiplier, changing it so it has initiation, changing it so it's fixed damage to a random enemy, right? Changing it so it does a percentage of the damage of the attack card to all enemies. And then there's another one that activates the inspiration effect of one of the cards in your hand at random, like every turn, which is something that's pretty cool there. Another one of her cards here, and I think probably going to be possibly one of her best cards, is Prepare to Subdue. Now, the base version of this card is also really good. It costs 0. This is going to be a card you guys are going to want to duplicate the crap out of, I think, when you're making her decks, and it's just going to be the best card there a lot of the time. So it's going to draw you one of her cards, one of Yuki's attack cards, and give it 20% damage for 1 turn. That is the base version of the card. Now, as far as epiphanies for this one goes, there's one that has retain on it and has a higher damage bonus, I think around 40%. So if you want to just have it sit in your hand and use it as like a combo activator where you have it sit there, use a bunch of them to draw a bunch of her own attack cards out of the deck, or just a bunch of attack cards for a bunch of damage bonuses as well, and drop them all in one turn for big damage, you can do that. There's one that draws a card that I think always has like an inspiration effect. It draws an attack inspiration card out of the deck instead of just an attack card of hers, and then gives it a damage bonus. There's one that actually draws 2 attack cards out of the deck and then does something with the damage bonus as well. It might be decrease the damage of them for 1 turn, which is still kind of insane that she has a 0 draw 2. There's another one that draws it, increases the damage by 20%, and then it also has like the card itself, the skill card, has inspiration to draw another attack card. So if you somehow draw prepare to subdue with someone like Nia or something, then you can chain it into drawing 2 attack cards with no downside. So this is probably going to be one of her best cards if that makes it all the way through in like a Nia Yuki team, where you adagio one of Yuki's cards to draw these 2 out. One of them being this skill card, it activates the inspiration, and then you could play it for 0, draw 2 more attack cards of Yuki's out of the deck. There's just a ton of ways that you can do cool stuff there. The final one here, I do believe, is like draw an attack card, and then you draw another attack card at the start of your next turn. My favorite one though is going to be the draw 2, especially the one that doesn't have a downside on it. It's the one that makes you work for it the hardest, but like, honestly, with the right Nia build, I think Yuki and Nia are just going to be a really crazy good combo. One downside I can see from this kit so far is that there really isn't a ton of damage inspiration cards in her kit. It really is just flash. So she's a character who's going to want to duplicate not just some of her skill cards to really be self-sufficient, like the 0 draw an inspiration card out of your deck or draw multiple attack cards out of your deck. You're going to want to duplicate that a couple of times, and then you're going to want to duplicate like some of her big damage inspiration cards like Flash, or like her ultimate that is, you know, big damage, 240% damage with a damage bonus that then has inspiration for multiple hits. So it could be something where you need to be able to hit pretty high save data before you start kind of really being able to use Yuki in a more broken way, because she really is all about this inspiration mechanic, but not very many of her attack cards actually have inspiration, and she doesn't really have very many big attack cards. There's some with Trickery Strike where you can give it inspiration itself, and even some of the skill cards can get inspiration itself, so you get some benefits there when you're drawing those cards. But she really only has access to like Flash and her ultimate Iceberg Cleave that really have like a damage bonus from being affected by the inspiration mechanic. So I think she's potentially going to be like a really strong big AoE character. I just think you're going to be able to need to not just allow her to draw multiple cards out of her deck, but also have those cards existing in the deck to draw them as well. She doesn't have a lot of things that create inspiration cards, right? There's no like strike generators like Maylin has. So she's gonna have like a pretty sizable deck. You might want to remove some of her basic cards because those don't have inspiration. So like her 1 and 2 drop, you know, normal basic card, her shield for 1. You're gonna want to remove all those cards out of the deck. Then you're gonna want to duplicate Flash. You're gonna want to duplicate some of her skill draw cards. And that's kind of going to be what you want. You want like 2 or 3 flashes. You're going to want like 2 or 3, you know, prepare to subdues, and maybe a trickery strike or 2, depending on what your RNG is. And that's just like a lot of duplication to make this character work, because she wants to and has the ability to draw so many cards of herself per turn. You need to actually have access to those in the deck as well, meaning that you have to have like an 8, 9, 10 card deck probably. With Yuki to go through these big combo motions. But we'll have to see exactly how she shapes out at the end of the day. I think she looks pretty powerful, potentially. I think she looks fun to play too. Let me know what you think about her down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.